Hello and welcome to the Algebra 1 Notes. This is a video over section 5, which is about evaluating functions. Okay, and what we want to talk about today is we want to analyze a function represented by an equation, table, or graph to determine the output given the input and vice versa. We want to find input and output values of two functions graphed on the same coordinate plane. And then we want to be able to write the inverse of a given linear function. So the first thing I want to talk about here is that you have these three different things, okay? You have an equation or a function. So I'm going to call this a function. Okay, this is a table, and this is a graph, okay? And the main thing I want you to come away with this is that all three things mean the same thing. Okay, we use the function to help generate a table of values, and then we can actually plot those values on a graph and see what we got. So that's what we're doing today. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem. The next problem says evaluate the function to determine the output value when the input value is 2. Okay, so what this is asking us, okay, it wants us to determine the output value. Output value, that means y value. Okay, when the input value is 2, that's an x value. Okay, and so what we want to do is we want to just look at this table and we want to say, all right, well, you know, what is the y value? So what is the y value when x equals -2? Okay, and again, the function value, this f of x, is another way for me to say y, all right? So when x is 2, okay, when x is -2, we're trying to figure out what's the y value. Now, if I look at my table over here, I notice that I have a value of 2, okay, but I don't have a value of -2. So what I do, so I can't use my, my table here, but I can use my function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in -2 into this, and we're going to see what we're going to get. So I'm going to do f of -2 plug that into my function. Now watch what I do. When I have a negative value and I'm raising it to a power, like I am here, I need to do parentheses -2 to the fourth minus 3 times -2 cubed plus 2 times -2, okay, and then minus 1. Okay, so as a result, what I need to do is I need to do -2 to the fourth. That's -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. Because I have an even power, all right, I'm multiplying that 4 times. So a negative number multiplied 4 times is going to give me positive. So this is going to give me positive 16. And then I'm going to do minus 3 times -2 cubed. Now, because I'm raising that to an odd power, okay, 3 is odd, -2 times -2 times -2 is going to give me actually -8. So I've got -8. And then -2 times -2 is -4 minus 1. Okay, so now let's evaluate this. Using my order of operations, I need to multiply first. So I've got 16. -3 times -8 is really going to be positive 24. And then minus 4, and then minus 1. So you can do this a number of ways. I can take 16 plus 24, that's going to give me 40. All right, minus 4 minus 1, which gives me 40 minus 4 is 36, minus another one is going to give me 35. So that's the y value, okay, when x is -2. Okay, and that's the answer that we're looking for, that this is 35. But we also want to make sure that we're writing this out, that we write out that that f of -2 is equal to 35. And remember what this means. This is just the point on the graph, okay? This is the point -2 comma 35, okay? So the x value is -2, the y value is 35, okay? Let's take a look at the next one, okay? Now what it wants us to do is, in this, you're given this function g of x, okay? And guys, we need to realize that, again, even though that we have named this function something else, g of x, this means the y value. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this, and just to know what we're talking about, that I can rewrite this as y equals x cubed plus 6x squared, okay, plus 12x, and then plus 8. All right, and it wants us to determine the function's value when x is equal to -1. Okay, so again, okay, the function value, that's the same thing as a y value, okay? Now, when x is -1, so here's x, here's the output value, I'm also going to call this a y value, okay? When x is -1, what's the y value? Well, I can't tell that from the table because it doesn't give it to us, okay? I don't have the value of -1 here, and so, I don't know what it is necessarily. So what I have to do is I have to use the equation, okay? So I'm going to do g of -1, okay? And I'm going to plug in -1, so I'm going to get -1 cubed plus 6 times -1 squared plus 12 times -1. So plus 12 times -1 and then plus 8. Okay, so here's what I get. Okay, I've got -1 cubed. So if I take a negative number and I multiply it by itself 3 times, that's going to give me a negative number. Okay, so I'm going to get -1 times -1 times -1, which is just going to give me -1. Okay, if I take a negative number and I square it, raise it to an even power, it's going to become positive. So +1, so -1 times -1 is +1, times 6 is going to be plus 6. So I'm going to do a plus 6. And then here I've got 12 times -1. That's just going to give me -12 and then plus 8. All right. So here's what we get. We're going to get -1. You can do this a number of ways. I'll just go left to right. -1 plus 6, that's going to give me a positive 5. And then -12 plus 8 is going to give me -4. So I'm going to get -5 minus 4, which is going to give me positive 1. Okay, so what we then know is that g of -1 is equal to positive 1. Okay, and that translates to the point, well, and I see that here, our answer is right here. But I see that that point, guys, is the same thing as the point -1, comma 1. All right, they mean the same thing, okay? All right, let's take a look at this one. Okay, it says use the given functions graph to determine the output value when the input is 1. Okay, again, output means y value. Input means x value. Okay, and so what I want to do, I have this function. So the x, so it's asking me, the x value is 1. What is the y value? Okay, so when I look over here at my function, I have this point here. Okay, and that's the point 1, comma 0. Okay, and so the output value, so I'm just going to say this, that you have the point, the output equals 0. Okay, that the y value of this point here is 0. Okay, and then it says, what's the function's value when x equals -2? Okay, so the function value, again, remember that the function value is the same thing as saying a y value. Okay, so over at -2, okay, and that's not an apparent point. Okay, when x is equal to -2, okay, that's that point right here. Okay, and the corresponding y value is 6. So the point on the graph here is the point -2, comma 6. So the y value, the function value, is equal to 6. Okay, and that's it. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, it says use the graph to evaluate the function for the given input value. So what this is saying f of -1 is equal to what? So again, I'm going to write that, and I'm going to zoom in here. It says that, what is the y value when x equals -1? Okay, same thing down here. This is asking what is the y value when x equals +1. All right, so when I come over here, I'm going to say, all right, -1 is right here. Okay, there's this point right here. And we don't exactly know for sure what that value is, but I know that it's going to be in between, here's -10. Okay, here's 0. So this value would have to be -5, okay, for this line right here. So it's got to be in between -5 and -10. And I would assume that it's a little bit closer to 10. So I'm going to go ahead and call this point the point -1, comma -8. All right, and I'm just looking at the graph, okay? So then what I know is that if I wanted to find f of -1, that's going to equal 8. I'm sorry, -8, okay, roughly. Okay, it could be -7, could be something else, but you just got to think about what you got. All right, then the next one we want to find is what's happening at 1. Okay, here's 1. This was -1. And so, I'm trying to figure out what this y value is. I don't exactly know what it is. However, I know it's between -10 and -15. Okay, it's a little bit closer to -10, so I'm going to call this point 1, comma -12. So what I would want to write then is if I said what's f of 1, okay, when x is 1, what's the y value? Okay, and the y value is -12. Okay, and that's it. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at this next question. It says the function f of h is equal to -720h plus 10,080. This function is used to determine the volume of water in gallons in a pool based on a certain number of hours h that the pool has been draining. Okay, so how much water is left in the pool after 12 hours of draining? So here's what I want to do. I want to identify that h is equal to the number of hours, okay, and that f of h is equal to the amount of water in gallons. So the amount of water in gallons, okay? And so what it wants us to do, it wants us to figure out how much water, that's an amount of water, is left in the pool after 12 hours of draining. So here's what I know. I know that I have 12 hours, and I want to, so hours is 12, so I'm going to say this. H is equal to 12, okay? I'm trying to find how many gallons of water do I have after 12 hours, okay? So what's F of 12 equal to, all right? So what we would want to do is we want to just plug in 12 in for H into our function and see what we get. So here's what we've got. If I do F of 12, okay, that means I'm doing negative 720 times 12 and then plus 10,080. Okay, 10,080, all right? And so with the little use of a calculator, let's figure out what negative 720 times 12 is. And once we do that, we find that negative 720 times 12 is negative 8,640, and then plus 10,080, all right? And so if we add these two numbers together, we're going to get that we have a total of 1,440 gallons of water after 12 hours. So what this means, okay, when I look at this, I want to be able to explain what these numbers mean. And it says that after 12 hours, there are 1,440 gallons of water, remaining. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, and this is just something that we've talked about. You know, if f of 2 is equal to 20, then f of x equals 20 when x equals 2. Okay, so, you know, it's basically just telling us that this is a point, okay, that x is 2. All right, this really translates to the point 2 comma 20, okay? And this is your x value, and that this is your y value, okay? But we just need to understand, guys, that f of x, you know, is the same thing as saying y. F of x is equal to y, okay? Any function value, anytime where you have this number parentheses, your variable, that's your y value, okay? So, so it says this, that we want to determine the input that would give an output value of 18/5. So what I have here, and you know, it looks like it's going to be -2 based on the table, but let's just kind of think about this, okay? Even though it has these words, determine the input that would give an output of 18/5. So input, that word, is an x value, okay? Output value is a y value. All right? So you have your x value, you have your y value. All right? The y value, and I'm going to say this, that f of x is equal to 18/5. Okay? Then what is x equal to? All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 18/5 and I'm going to substitute it into that function. Okay? And I'm going to do 18/5 is equal to 1/5 x plus 4. And I'm going to solve this equation, okay? And so in order for me to solve this equation, I'm going to rewrite it over here. Okay, I'm going to write 18/5 is equal to 1/5 x plus 4. So 1/5 x plus 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, okay? So you have 18/5 minus 4 over 1 is equal to 1/5 times x, okay? Now, in order to combine these, I need to get a common denominator. I'm going to multiply both by 5 on top and 5 on the bottom. So we end up getting 18/5 minus 20/5, and that's equal to 1/5 x. So what I'm going to do here, now that I have a common denominator, I can just, subtract my numerators. And so I get 18 minus 20, which is -2 over 5, is equal to 1/5 x. Now, in order to solve this, Okay, when I'm multiplying by a fraction, okay, to move the fraction to the other side, I really want to multiply by its reciprocal, which is 5 over 1. Okay, that means I flip the fraction and multiply by 5 over 1. Okay, so then what happens here is that your 5's divide out here and here, so you end up getting negative 2 is equal to x. Okay, and you can kind of just tell that from the table. And that's just something that I was able to kind of like take a look at and see. I noticed that every time we increase by 2, the numerator here increases by 2. This increases by 2, the numerator increases by 2. But if we increase it by 1, then the numerator would increase it by 1 to give me 18/5. So that's where negative 2 came in. That's how I kind of knew that. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, it says that you have this function here. F of x is equal to negative 1/3 x plus 7. Determine the input value that would give an output value of 2/3. So, remember, input means x, output means y. All right. So what we want to plug in 2/3 into our function value, which is what we've done here, and then that's equal to negative 1/3 x plus 7. We went ahead and subtracted 7 from both sides, so we get this value here. But we have this equation, negative 19/3 is equal to negative 1/3 x. If I multiply both sides by negative 3 over 1, flip the fraction, multiply by negative 3 over 1, okay, then what we get is we get that x is just equal to, now here's what happens. The negatives, two negatives make a positive, okay, so the 3's divide out, so you just get x. The two negatives make a positive, and the 3's divide out, so you're left with 19 over 1, so x is just equal to 19. Okay? And that's it. All right? Take a look at the next one. Okay, use the graph to determine the input value that corresponds with the given output values. So this is asking me to use the graph to determine the input value, that's your x value, that correspond to the given output values, your y values. So if I zoom in on this, okay, when it says, this is basically asking, what's the x value when y is 24? So I'm going to say this, y equals 24. Okay, what's x equal to? All right, so then, okay, what I have here is I'm going to look at 24. I have a number of y values that are 24, okay? So I know this. I know that x could equal negative 3.27. It could equal 0. It could equal 1. And it could equal 4.27. So I'm going to say that x is equal to negative 3.27, comma 0, comma 1, and then 4.27, okay? And then, all right, it's asking us the same question, but it's asking us for the value of 80. Okay, and the thing of it is that we don't really know that, okay? We don't have a y value of 80. This is asking for a y, when y equals 80, okay, and then x is equal to what? X is equal to what? And we can't really determine that, okay? So this is, can't determine. Okay? And so that's the idea, all right, is that we can't really determine that because we can't really tell from the graph, okay? Okay, here's the last page, and what we have here is we have this graph, we have a parabola here. We want to use the graph to determine the input values that correspond with f of x equals 1. Okay, when you see this notation, f of x equals 1, that is a y value, okay? We wanted to determine the input values, that's an x value, okay? So when the y value is positive 1, which is right here and right here, okay, what are the two x values that happens at? And I notice that that's negative 7 and positive 2, okay? And so this is our answer, okay? Okay, and on this one, it wants us to compare the inputs and outputs of the given function. So we have this function f, which is in yellow or orange, and we have this function g, which is in green. Okay, and what we notice here, what I notice about each of these points, okay, is that, I have this point here, and it has the point 2, 3, and 3, 2, all right? They share a common point of 1, 1, and then we have these other points, -3, -1, and -1, -3, okay? So we have those points. Now what I've noticed is that between these two, the x and y values are switched, are reversed, okay? Call that switched, okay? And when that happens, okay, that means that these are inverses. Okay, inverses means that you switch the x and y value. Switch x and y values. Okay? And so what we want to do is we want to, I'm going to show you guys how to do that. We'll study that more, but, we have this thing where it says complete the steps in order to write the inverse of f of x is equal to x plus 5. So what I have, first of all, is I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to rewrite, and I'm going to replace f of x with y. Okay? So, and then I'm going to, so that's the first step. Okay? The second step is switch x and y values. And then the third step is to then solve for y. So what I have, I'm going to rewrite this as y equals x plus 5, okay? And then what I want to do is I want to switch my x and y values. So I'm going to write x is equal to y plus 5, okay? And then I'm going to solve for y. So then I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides and get y by itself. So I know that y is equal to x minus 5, okay? So then what I know is that these two equations are inverses, okay? And that's all I got. So we'll talk more about all this stuff, but I hope you enjoyed these videos. I know it's kind of tricky, but a lot of it, guys, is just reading what they're asking you to do and finding points on a graph. So that's all I got. See you in a bit. Bye.